Captain Elena Vasquez stepped onto the training deck of the Galactic Defense Academy with her grandfather's katana strapped to her hip. The weapon looked ancient and primitive among the plasma rifles, energy shields, and graviton cannons that lined the walls. Around her, cadets from dozens of species practiced with their respective traditional weapons before moving on to standard military equipment. The Zephyrian instructor, Commander Kethvar, stood nearly 8 feet tall with forearms and chitinous armor that gleamed under the artificial lights. His species had dominated galactic warfare for 3 centuries, and their combat academies were considered the finest in known space. Humans had only joined the Galactic Defense Coalition 5 years ago, and they were still proving themselves worthy of inclusion. Elena had volunteered for the Advanced Weapons Training Program, one of only 12 humans selected from Earth's military forces. The others carried standard human weapons, assault rifles, combat knives, and tactical gear that met Coalition specifications. She was the only one who had requested permission to bring a traditional blade. "Attention, cadets!" Kethavar's voice resonated through the training hall, translated instantly by the universal communicators each student wore. "Today we begin practical weapons assessment. Each of you will demonstrate proficiency with your species' traditional combat implements before advancing to Coalition standard equipment." The instructor's 4 eyes swept across the assembled students. Tall, blue-skinned Altarians hefted energy spears that could pierce starship hulls. The rock-like granite folk carried massive warhammers that could shatter mountains. Sleek, cat-like Phylixians balanced curved energy blades that hummed with lethal force. When Kethvar's gaze reached Elena, he paused. His mandibles clicked in what she had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of amusement. "Human Vasquez," he said, approaching her position. "I see you have brought an antique." Several cadets turned to look. Elena kept her expression neutral as she met the instructor's gaze. "Sir, this is a katana. It has been in my family for 6 generations. Kethvar reached out with one of his secondary arms and tapped the weapon's scabbard with a chitinous finger. "Metal, primitive steel if my sensors read correctly. No energy field, no molecular enhancement, no gravitic manipulation." He clicked his mandibles again. "Tell me, cadet, how do you expect to compete with weapons that can cut through energy shields and armor plating using sharpened metal?" Elena's jaw tightened slightly. "Sir, I believe traditional weapons have value beyond their technological specifications." "Value?" Kethvar's voice carried clear skepticism. He gestured to a nearby Altarian cadet. "Zixnal, demonstrate your weapon's capabilities." The blue-skinned warrior activated his energy spear. The weapon's tip erupted and contained plasma that could reach temperatures of 10,000 degrees. He thrust it toward a practice target, and the reinforced metal melted like butter. "Now then," Kethvar turned back to Elena. "Show us what your traditional blade can accomplish." Elena unsheathed the katana slowly. The blade was dark steel, folded thousands of times by her ancestor who had been a master swordsmith in feudal Japan. Intricate engravings ran along the fuller, depicting cranes in flight. The edge caught the light like captured starfire. She approached the same type of target Zixnal had destroyed. The metal was standard Coalition armor plating, designed to withstand most energy weapons. Elena raised the katana, took a breath, and struck. The blade passed through the target cleanly, leaving a perfect cut. But the armor plating was thick. While impressive, the cut hadn't gone all the way through. Kethavar's mandibles clicked louder. Adequate for primitive warfare, perhaps. But in modern combat, you will face enemies whose armor your blade cannot penetrate, whose shields will stop your attacks entirely. "What will you do then, human?" "I will adapt, sir." Adapt. The word seemed to amuse him further. Young warriors often believe their traditional ways are superior to proven technology. Experience teaches otherwise. In 3 days we will have combat trials. You will face opponents using modern weapons while you adapt with your antique. Elena sheathed the katana with practiced precision. "I understand, sir." As the lesson continued, Elena noticed the other cadets watching her with expressions ranging from sympathy to amusement. The Phylixian beside her, a warrior named Silanth, leaned closer. "Your instructor seems to doubt human capabilities," she whispered through the translator. "He's not wrong about the technological gap," Elena replied quietly. "But there are things technology can't account for." "Such as?" Elena smiled slightly. "Creativity, adaptability. the willingness to find solutions others haven't considered. Over the following days, Elena observed every aspect of the Academy's training regimens. She studied the strengths and weaknesses of each species' combat styles, learned about their armor and defensive systems, and most importantly, she practiced, not just with her katana but with her mind. Humans had always been considered physically unremarkable by galactic standards. They weren't as strong as the granite folk, as fast as the Phylixians, or as well armored as the Zephyrians. But they possessed something that had allowed them to dominate their own world and earn a place among the stars: the ability to think beyond conventional parameters. Elena spent hours in the Academy's archives, researching metallurgy, studying the molecular composition of coalition armor, and learning about energy field dynamics. She practiced with her blade until her movements became fluid poetry, each strike calculated and precise. The night before the combat trials, she sat in her quarters, carefully examining her grandfather's katana under a magnification scope. The weapon was indeed primitive by galactic standards, but it was also something more. It was 600 years of human craftsmanship, each fold in the steel representing knowledge passed down through generations. As she meditated with the blade across her knees, Elena thought about what it meant to be human in a galaxy of superior species. They couldn't outfight most aliens in terms of raw strength or speed. They didn't have natural armor or energy manipulation abilities, but they had something that had carried them from their primitive homeworld to the stars. They refused to accept limitations. The combat trials would begin at dawn, and Kethvar had made it clear he expected to prove his point about the superiority of modern weapons. Elena intended to prove a different point entirely: that human ingenuity could find ways to succeed where raw technological superiority might fail. She carefully cleaned and oiled the katana, whispering a prayer her grandfather had taught her. Tomorrow, she would show the galaxy what it truly meant to be human. Dawn came too early for most cadets, but Elena had been awake for hours. She stood in the Academy's meditation garden, moving through the ancient forms her grandfather had taught her. Each movement flowed into the next, the katana becoming an extension of her body as she practiced the deadly dance passed down through centuries of human warriors. The combat trials would be held in the Academy's main arena, a massive space capable of simulating any battlefield environment. Elena had studied the arena's specifications carefully, noting how the energy-dampening fields worked, where the sensor arrays were positioned, and most importantly, how the protective barriers functioned. As she completed her morning routine, other cadets began gathering in the preparation area. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation. These trials would determine their final rankings and assignments within the Galactic Defense Coalition. Failure meant returning home in disgrace. Commander Kethvar entered the arena with his characteristic swagger, his forearms moving in complex patterns as he gestured to his assistants. His armor gleamed with fresh polish, and Elena noticed he had added additional ceremonial markings. Clearly, he expected today to be significant. "Cadets," his voice boomed across the space. "Today you will demonstrate not only your weapon mastery, but your tactical thinking under pressure. Each combat will be scored on effectiveness, strategy, and adaptability. The rules are simple. Achieve victory through any means necessary while causing no permanent harm to your opponent." Elena's enhanced hearing, one of the few advantages humans possessed, caught the subtle emphasis on any means necessary. Kethvar was giving them permission to be creative. Though she doubted, he expected her to take full advantage of that freedom. The first several matches proceeded predictably. Zixnal, the Altarian with the plasma spear, dominated his opponent through superior reach and firepower. A granite folk warrior used brute strength to overwhelm a smaller Phylixian. Each victory followed the expected pattern of technological and physical superiority, determining the outcome. "Human Vasquez," Kethvar called out as the arena reset for the next match. "You will face Cadet Morden of the Hegemony Guard." Elena's opponent entered the arena from the opposite side. Morden was a Zephyrian like Kethvar, standing 7.5 feet tall with natural chitinous armor covering his entire body. He carried a graviton mace that could manipulate local gravity fields, allowing him to make his strikes impossibly heavy or create defensive barriers of compressed space. The arena floor was configured as an urban combat zone with buildings, vehicles, and debris scattered across the landscape. perfect for demonstrating tactical thinking alongside weapon skills. Begin, Kethvar commanded. Mordun immediately activated his weapon's gravity field, causing nearby debris to orbit around him like protective satellites. He advanced confidently, clearly expecting to end the match quickly against the primitive human and her ancient blade. Elena didn't meet his charge. Instead, she sprinted toward the nearest building, using her smaller size and human agility to navigate through obstacles that would slow her larger opponent. Mordun followed, his graviton mace smashing through barriers as if they were paper. Running already? Kethvar's voice carried across the arena, translated for all spectators. How long can primitive tactics delay the inevitable? Elena reached the building's upper level and turned to face her pursuer. Mordun was climbing the exterior wall, his natural claws providing easy purchase on the simulated concrete. His gravity weapon would give him tremendous advantages in close combat, unless she could find a way to turn his strength against him. As he reached the rooftop, Elena drew her katana and assumed a defensive stance. Mordun activated his mace's gravity field to maximum intensity, the weapon humming with contained force that made the air shimmer around it. "Your blade cannot penetrate my natural armor, human," he said confidently, "and my weapon will crush you regardless of your skill." He swung the mace in a devastating overhead strike. Elena didn't try to block or parry. Instead, she rolled aside at the last moment. The graviton mace hit the rooftop with tremendous force, the gravity field interacting with the building's structural supports in unexpected ways. The entire floor collapsed. Both combatants fell through into the building's interior. But Elena had anticipated this. She had studied the arena's construction specifications and knew exactly how much stress the simulated buildings could withstand. As they fell, she grabbed onto a support beam while Mordun crashed to the lower level, momentarily stunned by the unexpected collapse. Elena dropped down behind him, but instead of attacking, she did something that caught everyone by surprise. She began cutting through the building's support columns with surgical precision, her blade finding the exact stress points where human engineering principles said the structure would fail. "What is she doing?" she heard Silenth whisper from the spectator area. Mordun recovered quickly and turned to attack, but Elena was already moving. She led him in a deadly chase through the building's interior, using her knowledge of physics and engineering to systematically weaken the structure while avoiding his increasingly frustrated attacks. The graviton mace was devastatingly powerful, but it was also indiscriminate. Each missed strike damaged the building further, creating the exact conditions Elena needed. She wasn't trying to defeat Mordun through superior combat skill. She was using his own weapon's power to set a trap. "Clever," Kethvar muttered, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "But cleverness will not save her when he corners her." Elena reached the building's central support column and turned to face her opponent. Mordun approached confidently, his weapon ready to deliver a killing blow. Around them, the building groaned ominously, stress fractures spreading through weakened concrete and steel. "Nowhere left to run, human," Mordun declared. Elena smiled. "I'm not running anymore." She raised her katana not to attack Mordun, but to strike the central support column at precisely the point where her calculations indicated maximum structural failure would occur. The ancient blade, guided by 6 centuries of human craftsmanship and engineering knowledge, found the exact molecular weakness in the simulated steel. The building began to collapse in a controlled demolition that Elena had orchestrated through careful planning and precise execution. But instead of being caught in the destruction, she used her knowledge of the collapse pattern to ride the falling debris like a surfer on a wave. Mordun, caught completely off guard by the building's systematic failure, found himself trapped under falling rubble. His graviton mace's defensive fields protected him from injury, but the sheer volume of debris pinned him helplessly. Elena landed gracefully on a stable piece of wreckage and walked calmly to where Mordun lay trapped. She placed the tip of her katana gently against his throat, just above the edge of his natural armor where the carotid artery would be vulnerable. "Yield," she said quietly. The arena fell silent. Even Kethvar seemed stunned by what he had witnessed. A human with a primitive weapon had defeated a superior opponent, through tactics no one had anticipated. "Victor." "Human Vasquez," the arena's automated system announced. The debris field was cleared and Mordun was freed from the rubble. Elena cleaned her blade and returned it to its scabbard. She had proven her point, but this was only the beginning. The real challenges were still ahead. The Academy's training complex buzzed with activity in the days following Elena's unexpected victory. Word of the human who had defeated a Zephyrian warrior using environmental tactics and an ancient blade spread quickly through the ranks. Some cadets looked at her with newfound respect, while others seemed to view her success as a dangerous fluke that needed correction. Commander Kethvar had grown noticeably colder toward Elena since the combat trial. During weapons demonstrations, he scrutinized her performance with increased intensity, searching for flaws to exploit. She could sense his frustration that his assumptions about human limitations had been challenged so dramatically. Elena continued her routine of early morning practice, but now she was no longer alone. Silanth, the Phylixian warrior, had begun joining her in the meditation garden. The cat-like alien moved with natural grace, but she watched Elena's forms with genuine curiosity. "Your movement patterns are unlike any combat style in the galactic databases," Silanth observed, as Elena completed a complex kata. "The Academy's tactical computers cannot predict your next action sequence." Elena lowered her katana and wiped sweat from her forehead. "Human martial arts developed in isolation from galactic influence. We had to create our own solutions to combat problems. But your blade technique alone did not defeat Morden," Silanth pointed out. "You use the environment as a weapon. That requires a different kind of thinking." "My grandfather used to say that a true warrior sees weapons everywhere," Elena replied. "A blade is just the beginning. Everything around you can become part of your strategy if you understand how it works." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a maintenance drone carrying new training schedules. Elena scanned her assignments and felt a chill of concern. She had been selected for Advanced Individual Combat Assessment, a series of one-on-one matches against the Academy's top-rated cadets from each species. More troubling was the note at the bottom of her schedule. The assessments would take place in specialized arenas designed to neutralize environmental advantages. Smooth, featureless chambers with reinforced walls and minimal objects that could be used tactically. Kethvar was adapting to counter her strategies. That afternoon, Elena found herself in the Academy's technical library, studying advanced materials science and energy field dynamics. If she couldn't rely on environmental manipulation, she needed to understand her opponent's equipment better than they did themselves. She discovered something interesting about coalition armor systems. The energy shields that protected most species were designed to stop high-velocity projectiles and energy weapons. They were optimized for threats that moved faster than biological reflexes could track. But they had a significant weakness. They were less effective against slow, sustained pressure applied at precise angles. The revelation sparked an idea that made Elena smile for the first time in days. Her grandfather's katana wasn't just a cutting implement. It was a tool capable of applying enormous pressure along an impossibly thin edge. If she could find the right angle and apply the right amount of force. Elena's first advanced assessment was scheduled against Vexthari, a Crystalli warrior whose species had evolved from silicon-based life forms. Their natural armor was essentially living diamond, and their weapons were crystalline structures that could channel and focus energy to devastating effect. The arena was exactly as Elena had feared, a perfect white cube with smooth walls and no features that could be exploited. Vexthari stood in the center, his translucent body refracting light in beautiful patterns. In his hands, he held what appeared to be a sword made of pure crystal that hummed with contained energy. Human, Vexthari spoke through harmonic resonance rather than vocal cords, his words creating musical tones that the translator converted to speech. "I have studied recordings of your previous victory. Environmental manipulation will not serve you here." Elena drew her katana slowly, the dark steel looking primitive against her opponent's glittering perfection. "Then I suppose I'll have to try something else." Vexthari's crystal sword erupted with brilliant light as he channeled energy through its structure. The weapon could cut through virtually any known material and project energy blasts capable of melting armor plating. He advanced with confidence, clearly expecting to end the match quickly. Elena didn't retreat. Instead, she studied her opponent's movement patterns, noting how the crystal armor affected his mobility. Crystalli were incredibly strong and nearly invulnerable, but their rigid structure made them slightly slower to change direction than more flexible species. The first exchange was brief but revealing. Vexithari's energy soared past inches from Elena's head as she ducked under his strike. She responded with a test cut against his arm, and the katana's edge skittered harmlessly across the diamond-hard surface. "Your blade cannot harm me," Vexithari stated with crystalline certainty. "Surrender now and preserve your dignity." Elena smiled and adjusted her grip on the katana's handle. "You're right. I can't cut you, but I don't need to." She attacked again, but this time her strategy was completely different. Instead of trying to cut through Vexithari's armor, she began striking at the joints where different crystal plates met. The katana's edge found the microscopic gaps between armor segments and applied pressure at precisely calculated angles. Vexithari quickly realized what Elena was attempting. Impossible. The tolerance between my armor segments is measured in nanometers. No physical weapon can exploit such tiny spaces. But Elena had spent hours studying crystalline structures and the way they interfaced with each other. Her blade wasn't trying to cut through the armor. It was applying pressure to create stress fractures along natural crystal boundaries. Each strike was precisely placed to exploit the mathematical weaknesses inherent in crystal lattice structures. The process was gradual, almost imperceptible at first. But as Elena continued her methodical assault, hairline cracks began to appear in Vexithari's armor. The Crystalli warrior's confidence wavered as he realized his supposedly impenetrable defense was being systematically dismantled. "How?" he demanded, his harmonic voice showing strain for the first time. "Physics," Elena replied, striking another perfectly placed blow. "Crystal structures are incredibly strong, but they have predictable failure points. Every material has weaknesses if you understand its molecular composition." Vexithari attempted to end the match with a devastating energy blast, but Elena was already moving. She had studied his weapon's charging patterns and could predict when he would fire. The energy beam scorched the arena wall where she had been standing moments before. Elena's counterattack came immediately. She drove the katana's point into a stress fracture she had created near Vexithari's shoulder joint. The crystal armor, weakened by dozens of precisely placed strikes, finally gave way. The blade penetrated just far enough to touch the neural clusters beneath without causing permanent damage. Vexithari's crystal body went rigid as the katana's edge found the exact pressure point that would temporarily disrupt his nervous system. It was a technique Elena had adapted from human acupuncture, modified for crystalline anatomy, based on her study of Crystalli physiology. "Victor, Human Vasquez," the arena announced as Vexithari's paralyzed form toppled backward. Elena carefully withdrew her blade and helped stabilize her opponent as medical technicians rushed into the arena. The paralysis would wear off within minutes, leaving no permanent effects. As she left the arena, Elena could see Commander Cathvar in the observation deck, his mandibles clicking rapidly in what she now recognized as deep agitation. His carefully controlled assessment had been turned against him once again by human ingenuity and adaptability. But Elena knew the hardest tests were still ahead. Cathvar would not underestimate her a third time. Commander Cathvar paced through his private office, his forearms moving in agitated patterns as he reviewed combat recordings for the third time that evening. The humans' victories were becoming impossible to dismiss as luck or coincidence. Elena Vasquez was systematically defeating superior opponents through methods that defied conventional military wisdom. His mandibles clicked in, frustration as he paused the recording at the moment. Elena's primitive blade found the stress fracture in Vexithari's crystal armor. The mathematical precision required for such an attack was staggering. The human had calculated exactly where to strike dozens of times to create the perfect failure point. A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry to his office. "Enter," Cathvar commanded. General Thexmore, the Academy's Zephyrian commander, entered with the characteristic heavy footsteps of her species. Her armor bore the scars of decades of real combat, and her presence commanded immediate respect from all who served under her. "Cathvar," she said without preamble, "I've been reviewing the human's assessment scores. Her performance is unprecedented. Sir, I believe her successes are the result of exceptional preparation rather than genuine combat superiority." Cathvar replied carefully. When faced with truly superior opponents using optimal strategies, her primitive methods will prove inadequate. General Thexmore studied him with her compound eyes, each facet reflecting a different angle of light. "Are you certain?" Because her tactical innovations are attracting attention from Coalition High Command, there are discussions about fast-tracking her into advanced strategic planning positions. The thought made Kethvar's armor plates rattle with barely contained anger. A human elevated above warriors who had spent decades proving themselves? It was unthinkable. "Sir, I request permission to conduct one final assessment," he said. "A direct challenge under combat conditions that will properly demonstrate the limitations of human capabilities." General Thexmore's mandibles curved in what might have been amusement. "You wish to face her yourself?" "With your permission, yes, sir. I have trained for 40 years in military combat. I have served in 3 galactic conflicts and earned commendations for tactical excellence. If the human can defeat me using her primitive methods, then perhaps her approach has merit. If not, you will have proven that human arrogance is no match for proven Zephyrian superiority," the general finished. "Very well. But Kethvar, be warned. If you lose to a first-year human cadet, the embarrassment will reflect on this entire academy." "Understood, sir. I will not lose." Elena learned of the challenge the next morning when Silanth found her in the meditation garden, her feline features showing concern. "Kethvar has issued a formal combat challenge," Silanth explained. "The entire academy is talking about it. He's staking his reputation on proving human limitations." Elena continued her morning kata, the katana moving in fluid arcs as she processed this information. "What are the terms?" "Full combat assessment in the primary arena. No restrictions on tactics or environmental use. First to achieve decisive victory wins." Silanth paused. "Elena, Kethvar is not like the other instructors. He has real combat experience against some of the galaxy's most dangerous opponents. This isn't a training exercise." Elena completed her form and sheathed the blade. "Then I'll need to prepare accordingly." She spent the day in intensive study, reviewing everything the Academy's databases contained about Zephyrian combat capabilities. Kethavar's species had evolved as apex predators on a world where survival required constant vigilance and overwhelming force. Their forearms allowed for complex weapon combinations. Their natural armor could withstand most small arms fire, and their reflexes were nearly twice as fast as human standard. More challenging was Kethvar's weapon of choice, a molecular disruptor that could break down matter at the atomic level. The weapon required precise targeting and had limited range, but anything it touched would simply cease to exist on a molecular level. Elena also studied recordings of Kethvar's previous battles and training exercises. He was methodical, patient, and utterly ruthless in exploiting opponent weaknesses. Unlike the cadets she had faced, he would not underestimate her or fall for the same tricks twice. As evening approached, Elena made an unusual decision. Instead of spending the night in final preparation, she visited the Academy's memorial hall where fallen warriors from dozens of species were honored. She stood before a small section dedicated to humans who had died in Coalition service, reading their names and stories. Her grandfather had taught her that true strength came not from superior weapons or physical advantages, but from understanding what you were fighting for. These humans had died far from Earth, fighting alongside alien allies for principles they believed in. Their sacrifice reminded Elena that her upcoming battle was about more than personal victory. The next morning, the Academy's primary arena was packed with spectators from every species in the Coalition. Word of the challenge had spread beyond the Academy, and military observers from multiple worlds had come to witness what many considered a pivotal moment in human galactic relations. Elena entered the arena carrying only her katana, dressed in simple combat fatigues that looked primitive compared to the advanced armor worn by other species. Across the arena, Commander Kethvar made his entrance in full battle regalia. His armor had been polished to mirror brightness, and the molecular disruptor in his primary arm hummed with contained destructive energy. General Thexmore served as the official arbiter. This combat assessment will continue until one combatant achieves decisive victory or yields. All tactics are permissible within the bounds of non-lethal engagement. Combatants, are you prepared? Both warriors acknowledged their readiness. Begin, the general commanded. Kethvar did not make the mistake of underestimating his opponent. He advanced carefully, using his superior reach and multiple arms to maintain distance while probing Elena's defenses. The molecular disruptor lanced out in precise strikes that Elena barely avoided, each near miss reminding her of the weapon's devastating potential. Elena tried several of her previous tactics, but Kethvar had studied her methods thoroughly. Environmental features that she attempted to exploit were quickly neutralized by precise disruptor strikes. Stress points she aimed for were protected by additional armor plating he had installed specifically for this battle. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Elena found herself truly challenged by an opponent who was her equal in preparation and vastly superior in experience and equipment. As the battle continued, it became clear that conventional tactics would not suffice. Elena needed to find an approach that even Kethvar's extensive preparation had not anticipated. She needed to do something that no warrior in galactic history had ever attempted. The answer came to her as she observed the way light reflected off Kethvar's polished armor, creating complex patterns that shifted with his movement. She had been thinking like a warrior, but perhaps it was time to think like an artist. Elena's revelation struck her like lightning as she dodged another precise blast from Kethvar's molecular disruptor. The Zephyrian commander's polished armor wasn't just protection, it was a canvas. And her katana wasn't just a weapon, it was a brush capable of the finest detail work imaginable. She began moving differently, her attacks taking on an almost dance-like quality that confused the spectators and clearly frustrated Kethvar. Instead of striking to damage or disable, Elena's blade traced delicate patterns across his armor's surface. The cuts were so shallow they barely scratched the polish, too superficial to penetrate even the outermost layer of protection. "What are you doing, human?" Kethvar demanded, his forearms weaving a defensive pattern as he tried to understand Elena's seemingly pointless strategy. "Are you mocking this combat?" Elena didn't respond. Her concentration was absolute as she continued her methodical work. Each strike of the katana was precisely placed, creating hairline marks that formed intricate patterns across Kethvar's armor. To the observers, it looked like she had given up trying to win, and was instead performing some bizarre human ritual. Commander Kethvar grew increasingly aggressive, his disruptor lashing out in deadly arcs that forced Elena to push her agility to its absolute limits. But she continued her patient work, treating his armor like a master calligrapher approaching a blank scroll. "Enough of this," Kethvar snarled, raising his primary weapon for a killing strike that would end Elena's strange performance permanently. That was when Elena stepped back and smiled. "Look down," she said, quietly. Kethvar glanced at his armor and froze in absolute shock. Across the polished surface, Elena had engraved her name in perfect kanji characters, the Japanese writing flowing with artistic precision across his chest plate. But it wasn't just her name. It was a complete haiku poem that her grandfather had taught her, executed with such delicate skill that each character appeared to float on the mirror-bright surface. The arena fell silent as spectators realized what they were witnessing. Elena had not only marked Kethvar's supposedly impenetrable armor, she had turned it into a work of art that demonstrated absolute mastery over her weapon and complete control of the battle's tempo. But the true brilliance of her strategy was only beginning to unfold. The shallow cuts Elena had made weren't random decorative elements. Each line had been calculated to create stress patterns in the armor's molecular structure. The kanji characters weren't just artistic expression. They were a complex engineering diagram that mapped every weakness point in Kethvar's defensive systems. "Impossible," Kethvar whispered, running a secondary arm over the delicate engravings. "My armor's integrity readings show no structural damage." "You're right," Elena acknowledged. "I haven't damaged your armor at all, but I've mapped every stress point, every molecular boundary, every place where your protection interfaces with your underlying biology. I've written a manual for defeating you directly onto your chest." She raised her katana, and for the first time in the battle, Kethvar saw fear in his own reflection on the blade's edge. "I could strike any of those points and disable specific armor systems without harming you," Elena continued. "I could trace these lines deeper and create controlled failures that would leave you helpless. But I'm not going to do that." Kethvar's compound eyes widened. "Why not?" "Because proving I could win isn't the same as actually winning," Elena explained. "My grandfather taught me that true victory comes from understanding your opponent so completely that fighting becomes unnecessary." She lowered her weapon and took a step back. "I yield." The arena erupted in confusion. Spectators from dozens of species began arguing among themselves, trying to understand why the human had surrendered after demonstrating such extraordinary skill. Even General Thexmore seemed stunned by this unexpected development, but Commander Kethvar understood perfectly. He looked down at his armor again, studying the intricate patterns Elena had created. She hadn't just proven she could defeat him, she had shown that she understood him better than he understood himself. The artistry of her work revealed a depth of knowledge about Zephyrian anatomy, armor construction, and combat psychology that surpassed even his own understanding. "No," Kethvar said firmly, his voice carrying across the silent arena. "I yield." The silence in the arena stretched for what felt like an eternity. Commander Kethvar stood motionless, his forearms hanging at his sides as he stared down at the intricate artistry Elena had carved into his armor. The kanji characters seemed to glow under the arena lights, each stroke a testament to precision that bordered on the impossible. General Thexmore's voice finally broke the silence. "Commander Kethvar, explain your decision to yield." Kethvar raised his head slowly, his compound eyes reflecting a mixture of emotions that his species rarely displayed publicly. "Sir, Cadet Vasquez has demonstrated complete mastery over this combat. She has shown that she understands not only my capabilities but my limitations better than I do myself. Any warrior who can read an opponent so completely has already achieved victory regardless of the formal outcome." He turned to face Elena, his posture shifting from aggressive warrior to respectful equal. "Human, I have spent 40 years believing that superior technology and proven tactics were the foundation of military excellence. You have shown me that true mastery comes from understanding the deeper principles that govern all combat." Elena bowed formally, her katana held in a position of respect. "Commander, you taught me more in this single battle than months of academy training. Fighting someone of your skill forced me to discover capabilities I didn't know I possessed." The exchange sparked murmurs throughout the spectator galleries. Representatives from dozens of species began animated discussions about what they had witnessed. The implications extended far beyond a single training exercise. General Thexmore descended to the arena floor, her heavy footsteps echoing in the vast space. She examined Kethvar's armor closely, running her own fingers over the delicate engravings. "Remarkable," she said finally. "Cadet Vasquez, you've managed to engrave detailed artwork into military-grade armor using nothing but a primitive blade. Our best analysis equipment can barely detect stress patterns this subtle." Elena cleaned her katana carefully before sheathing it. "General, human craftsmanship has always focused on achieving maximum results with minimal resources. When you don't have superior technology, you develop superior understanding." Over the following days, word of Elena's achievement spread throughout Coalition space. Military academies on dozens of worlds requested detailed analysis of her techniques. Weapon designers began studying the principles behind her approach, seeking ways to incorporate human innovation into their own development programs. But the most significant change occurred within the Galactic Defense Academy itself. Commander Kethvar approached Elena 3 days after their battle with a proposal that surprised everyone. "I want you to become my teaching partner," he said during one of their now regular morning training sessions. "The Coalition needs warriors who can think beyond conventional parameters. Your approach to combat represents something entirely new in galactic military science." Elena looked up from where she was practicing forms with Silanth and several other cadets who had begun learning human martial techniques. "What did you have in mind?" "A new training program that combines traditional martial excellence with adaptive problem-solving," Kethvar explained. "Students would learn to see beyond their species' natural advantages and find creative solutions to impossible challenges. Human methodology integrated with the best practices from across the galaxy." The program launched 6 months later with Elena as its co-director. Students from every Coalition species learned to approach combat as both art and science, developing skills that transcended the limitations of their equipment or natural abilities. Elena's katana, once mocked as a primitive relic, became the symbol of the program. Students learned that true strength came not from having the best weapons, but from understanding how to use any tool to its maximum potential. Years later, when Elena had become one of the Coalition's most respected tactical instructors, she would often tell new students about the day she engraved her name across Commander Kethvar's armor. But the real lesson, she explained, wasn't about defeating a superior opponent. The most important victory, she would say, is helping your opponent discover that they're capable of more than they believed possible. When you fight someone, you're not trying to destroy them. You're trying to understand them so completely that conflict becomes unnecessary. Commander Kethavar, who had become Elena's closest friend and collaborator, would nod approvingly during these speeches. His armor still bore the faint traces of Elena's artwork, carefully preserved as a reminder of the day he learned that strength took many forms. The katana that 6 generations of Elena's family had carried was eventually displayed in the Academy's Hall of Honor, alongside weapons from dozens of other species. But unlike the others, Elena's blade was still taken down regularly for use. She continued to practice with it every morning, teaching new students that the most powerful weapon any warrior could possess was the willingness to see beyond conventional limitations. The galaxy had learned a fundamental truth about humanity that day. They might not be the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced species, but they possessed something equally valuable. They refused to accept that any problem was truly impossible to solve, and sometimes, that refusal changed everything. Elena's legacy lived on in every coalition warrior who learned to think creatively under pressure, to see opportunities where others saw only obstacles, and to understand that true victory came not from superior force but from superior understanding. The human approach to warfare had transformed galactic military doctrine forever. Her grandfather's katana had, indeed, cut through more than armor that day. It had cut through centuries of assumptions about what it meant to be a warrior among the stars.